Six Flags Magic Mountain is a world-famous amusement park located in Valencia, California. For those of you who've been keeping up with the channel, I've recently uploaded my first park review and decided Cedar Point would be fun to talk about first. So, for my second park review, I almost feel obligated to talk about Six Flags Magic Mountain. The two parks are closely compared due to their large quantity of roller coasters. Matter of fact, this park has more coasters than any other on the planet right now. 19, soon to be 20 Scream Machines call Magic Mountain home, which may be more than Cedar Point, but that park still dubbed themselves as the roller coaster capital since they seem to have the superior lineup. So instead, Magic Mountain claimed themselves to be the thrill capital of the world, which is an equally fitting name given their variety of attractions. But before we get into that, where can you find this amusement park? Valencia is an up-and-coming neighborhood in Santa Clarita, just north of the city of Los Angeles. Where I live in San Diego, the drive is about 2.5 to 3 hours depending on LA traffic. But still, I find myself taking the journey many times a year and therefore own a season pass and call this one of my home parks. Because it is located in Southern California, those in the San Francisco metro area will have to take the 5.5-hour drive, which is a good distance away, but certainly a doable day trip nonetheless. As far as the park itself, the center is built atop a somewhat large hill and is covered by all these beautiful green trees. I guess that's where the park gets the name Magic Mountain, but regardless, there are mountains all around this park making for great views off the attractions. Speaking of, I think now would be a good time to jet through the park's long list of coasters. After all, it is what they are most well known for. Arguably the most popular ride here is X2, the first and only custom 4th dimension coaster on the North American continent. This type of ride allows your seats to rotate 360 degrees forwards or backwards on the side of the track. It's an absolutely terrifying concept, but it makes for one of the coolest coaster experiences in the world. The second most memorable ride here is Twisted Colossus. This Rocky Mountain constructed hybrid coaster is known for its unique Mobius dueling element. This basically means that not only do you race another train side by side, but you get to experience both the blue and green track in one continuous circuit. The same thing can be said about the park's most recent coaster edition, West Coast Racers. This makes Magic Mountain the only park in the world with 2 Mobius dueling coasters, though they are still quite different from one another. West Coast Racers was manufactured by Premier Rides and focuses on inversions and turns rather than airtime. It's a fun coaster, though I'm not a fan of the restraints and I think it was an odd choice for this park. One of the biggest reasons is because Six Flags Magic Mountain is home to a whole other Premier multi-launch coaster being Full Throttle. This one may not duel, but I actually prefer it to West Coast Racers for its underrated forces. Many of you may know this ride for having the tallest vertical loop in America, and indeed it lives up to the hype for sure. Tatsu is the park's Bolliger and Mabillard flying coaster, and it actually holds a number of records for the ride genre. Perhaps the most notable is the tallest pretzel loop element in the world, where you dive towards the ground and invert upside down. An underrated gem at this park is their aerodynamics mega looping coaster, Viper. This coaster opened in 1990 and is the only ride of its kind on this big of a scale operating in the world. This makes for some very intense elements, though it is a bit of a rough ride. Nothing that scares me away from riding it, but just a heads up if you're prone to motion sickness. A coaster I'd also consider to be overlooked is the park's only wooden roller coaster, Apocalypse. Since this ride reopened from a huge refurbishment in 2019, it has been kicking ass. The ride has a fantastic layout, keeps a great pace, and is probably one of the most themed attractions in the park. Located on top of the park's hill are 2 fun coasters in their own right. The first is Superman Escape from Krypton, which opened in 1997 as the first 100-mile-per-hour coaster. Nowadays, I'm hesitant that it launches quite that fast, but nevertheless, it's a rush from start to end, and that 400-foot spike makes for some awesome weightlessness. Not too far away is one of my favorite suspended coasters, Ninja. This ride opened in 1988 and doesn't get the love it deserves in my opinion. It's 100% a terrain coaster with its tallest lift hill at the end of the ride instead of the beginning. Back to the Giants, Riddler's Revenge is the largest stand-up coaster ever built by Bolliger and Mabillard, but it's certainly not for everyone due to its uncomfortable seating. Though if you can look past that, it has a masterful layout and some very intense inversions. Goliath is one of the first coasters you'll see from the parking lot with its menacing height and bright orange paint scheme. While the ride has stats on its side, I along with many other coaster enthusiasts will tell you that it's a pretty lackluster attraction relative to similar rides at other parks. Its drop is super shallow, the first turn offers no forces, and the most airtime you'll get is a sustained moment of weak floater. A more fast-paced attraction is also only a fraction of its size, but Batman the Ride has some seriously whippy elements. Its layout may be short, but it packs in some of the best maneuvers they could have chosen. Though to be honest, you can't say the same thing about the park's floorless coaster, Scream. While I do consider it to be an overhated attraction, there's no denying that its parking lot setting and elements of choice are pretty uninspired. I do enjoy it for what it is though, and I don't find it to be rough like a lot of people will tell you. New Revolution has a pretty ironic name because it's actually not new at all. This classic Schwarzkopf coaster was the first to feature a modern vertical loop back in the day. It's a great first looping coaster for those of you who are working their way up to the bigger rides, but it doesn't do a whole lot for me personally. Dialing down the intensity some more, Gold Rusher is a park original from 1971 and has actually held up pretty well over time. It's an old mine train coaster with a layout hugging the terrain, and like Revolution, this might be good for the younger guests. Speaking of, Six Flags Magic Mountain is the park with the most kiddie coasters in America. 4 to be exact, with Magic Flyer, Canyon Blaster, Speedy Gonzales, and Roadrunner Express. Lastly, the park's 20th coaster will be debuting this summer and will be called Wonder Woman Flight of Courage. This will be the tallest and fastest single rail coaster and looks to have some really fun elements. Judging by a near identical attraction at Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey, this may not have the whip that many of us were expecting, though still I'd be willing to bet that it becomes one of the best coasters at the park because the layout does look great. Phew, there we go, all 20 of the park's roller coasters. Now that we can finally move on, let's talk about their non-coaster attractions. When looking at their flat rides, I can think of a few record breakers of interest. My favorite is Lex Luthor Drop of Doom, which actually holds the record as the third tallest drop tower in the world. The ride was built alongside Superman Escape from Krypton's tower, and if you can catch them running simultaneously, Superman briefly sways the tower on ride, which is horrifying. The most popular flat ride at the park is Crazanity. This massive pendulum ride became the tallest and fastest ride of its kind when it opened in 2018. It has some amazing forces, great speed, and incredible weightlessness on the max wings. Right by it is the park's only dark ride, though despite what you'd expect from Six Flags, Justice League Battle for Metropolis is a seriously impressive attraction. It may have been cloned all throughout the chain, but I don't mind because these have some fantastic visuals. The last attraction I'll take note of is Jetstream. This is the park's classic log flume and is easily my favorite of the two water rides at the park. But other than that, I have nothing much more to say from a ride perspective. There are many staples for younger guests, most of which you'll find in the Looney Tunes kids area, but of course I never bother writing these because they were not built for my audience. So as you could imagine, this park's ride lineup and especially their coaster lineup has a world-renowned reputation. I feel like there's nothing more I could ask for except for maybe a B&M Giga Coaster, but let's be realistic, that's probably never going to happen. Something much more polarizing about Magic Mountain is its general appearance, and I don't mean to make it sound like it's just this park's problem because it seems to be an issue throughout the entire chain. Sections of the park are a bit dirty or haven't been updated in decades, although it seems like the park has been improving in this area lately with their newest section, the Underground, as well as their Boardwalk area and Scream Punked District section. But most notably, I'd really like to see them improve in Samurai Summit, which is the section where you're climbing up the hill and also atop the hill. I feel like they had good intentions with the theming, but this part of the park just doesn't really look that nice. At the end of the day though, this is why Six Flags has the reputation they do. They're known to be slightly more rundown relative to other theme park operators like Cedar Fair or even SeaWorld. Granted, I would say Magic Mountain is one of the nicer looking Six Flags parks because the company likes to pour a lot of investment into this place. Plus, I think the terrain setting and trees make up for it big time, so I'm actually not too disappointed from an overall appearance perspective. Also, that entrance is just stunning with the fountains. Something quite a bit more Six Flagsy that you'll tend to encounter here are operations, food, and customer service. Starting with the former, you shouldn't have too much of a problem on a Friday or a Sunday outside of the holidays. But here's an example. On weekdays, especially in the off-season, the park tends to run one train on almost every attraction. Usually this is justifiable when the park is not very busy at all, but it can be annoying when their dispatches are really slow. On my last visit, they were running one train on X2 and it took like 5 minutes for us to get going. So really, it's not the number of trains they run that I'm whining about, it's more the speed of the operations. At a Cedar Fair park, you don't run into this issue as often. Also, this park's food is pretty standard. I don't want to make it sound bad since a couple of the food joints are actually pretty solid. Twisted Witches has some really good sandwiches right by Twisted Colossus, and the pizza near Riddler's Revenge and Justice League is strangely fantastic. But I could see how if it was your first time coming here and you didn't know where to eat, you could probably run into some pretty lackluster food options. Lastly, customer service. This is more of an issue at the other Six Flags parks because I've actually never had an inherently bad experience with any of the employees here. Though what I am saying is that it would be nice if they were a bit more outgoing. Some of the crews like Full Throttle and Twisted Colossus are routinely really fantastic, but most of the others aren't that way at all. Again, I'm not saying that they're mean, but if improved upon, it could be something that could drastically improve one's experience. With that being said, take these past few complaints as minor nitpicks. None of these have ever ruined my time at this park, not even close, and even if it did, the ride lineup is enough of a reason for me to look past it. I really can't stress enough that despite all the things this park could improve upon, the collection of roller coasters really is not one of them. I would easily consider this to be the second best coaster lineup out there, only behind Cedar Point, and there's no signs of them slowing down with their new additions every few years. So to just kind of wrap things up, this is a park that all of you watching should really make it a point to visit at some point in your life. If I had to rate it on a score from 1 through 10, I would not be hesitant to give them a 9.5. They do seriously many things right with their ride offerings being at the top of their class, but other smaller things could be a little bit better, which is why they're not a 10. The atmosphere is just so grand, it almost makes you feel like you're in some sort of roller coaster mecca, which I guess you kind of are. So I absolutely love this place. It's no wonder why I'm constantly renewing my pass year after year because there's always a new reason for me to visit, and even if there weren't, they would still have enough on offer. If you've been here before, let me know what you think of the park because Six Flags as a company does happen to have a somewhat rocky reputation. With this being their flagship amusement park, it isn't as much of a problem here, but I've still heard of people having pretty rough visits here. If you enjoyed this content, I'd really appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe down below. Also, check out my Discord server that was created by a bunch of fans of the channel. A link will be in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.